Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with the one and only Larry C. Johnson. He of the Sonar21.com website. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with Larry Johnson, and I got a video I want to show everybody before we get started. It's only like 15 seconds long, but in light of the fact that poor old Macron seems to have been beaten mercilessly by his pummeled about the face and neck by his significant other. I'll just go with that term for now, his significant other. I want everybody to see how a real tough guy, Starmer, this guy really is able to protect himself. I think you're going to enjoy this. This is Kier Starmer showing off his boxing skills. You're going to love this one.
Yes, this is good. And again, that's it. And again, try and breathe. Relax.
Now that, my friends,
oh my God,
that is about the most pathetic punch I have ever seen. He couldn't break a water balloon. He's like,
yeah, this is one of those cases where you could put Kier Starmer in the octagon with any woman, and they would kick his behind all around that ring. He'd be crying for mercy in no time at all.
I tell you what, if you get in a fight and that guy's your backup, you better run, you better be able to run. If he's the guy that's going to help you out of a dark alley, you better be saying your prayers. Because he's real tough.
You can tell that the man's never been in a fight of any kind. Good Lord.
Look at him. I mean, look, Larry, I know we got to get into some serious talk. But I look at these guys, they're on a train with some unknown substance that they're putting in their pocket. We can speculate what that may be. Then I look at Macron and his significant others, I mean, just shoving him in the face, beating him about the face and neck, and he just kind of tries to laugh it off and gets out of the place. So he's obviously a victim of spousal abuse to some level. Then I look at Starmer. This guy comes out and he's punching like, I don't even know what he's doing. I wouldn't call that a punch. Looks like a ballet dancing or something. And I'm like, boy, that's the level of leadership. You know what? I got a funny feeling Putin ain't afraid of these guys. I got a feeling that Putin's not looking at those guys like, man, I'm really scared. Those guys are going to get me in the room and beat the hell out of me.
Yeah, Putin, he was a legitimate judo black belt. And if I went back and watched the Oliver Stone interviews with Putin that was done in 2015, 2016. And in one of those, here's Putin now. At the time they're interviewing him, I think he was 63 years old.
Uh-huh.
And he's out on the ice playing hockey. Now, it's not a young guy. It's the old guys league, okay? Because you see some of the other players, they're like his age too. But, they're body checking him. And I mean, and he's not one that if you touch me, I'm going to throw you in the gulag kind of thing. And he's good natured about it. And hey, you get knocked on your ass, you get knocked on your ass. But he comes across like the man's got some testosterone in him. Whereas between this this estrogen tornado that was taking place between Macron, Starmer, and Meretz, good God. And we talked about it before too, that particularly that scene on the train when they sit down and they see the paper package, the Kleenex, whatever it was, and the other object, they both reach for it to hide it. And anybody that's had kids, when they're doing something wrong, that's how they act.
Yes,
exactly how they act.
And anybody like you have a history in intelligence. I have a history in law enforcement. man, you can see that stuff a mile away.
Yeah.
And that was an easy one. That was like looking at them. It's not like you have to like, gee, I wonder if they're up to something. It was so obvious. And all of them at the same time, everybody in the room, instead of looking over like, what's going, nobody was relaxed. Nobody was like, hey, what? They were all like first of all, they were like a German Shepherd or a pointer.
Yeah.
Their bodies were all stiff, right? Like this. They were all like this. And they were like this, and their heads were up, their necks were up there. And I'm like, and then it's just like suddenly, and no casual conversation. Everybody was quiet. And then it's a snatch, and it was a hide. It wasn't, I pick up my ink pen. There's an ink pen. But if I pick up my ink pen like this, and I cover it with my hand, and I go like this, and then I bring it back. And then I just try to keep looking. I don't look at that's the other thing. If I pick this ink pen up and I go to put it in the drawer, I'm going to look in the drawer, I'm going to open the drawer, I'm going to put it in the drawer. I'm not going to go change hands, and open this drawer without looking and stick it in the drawer. Like, no, don't look. I'm not, it's like an ostrich. Don't look. You can't see that I'm putting this in. I'm like, you freaking guys are so obvious. It's unbelievable that they were up to no good. And then what killed me was Macron, after his wife kicked his ass. He said, they started off by saying it was of the Russians. Did you know that? They started off saying like, oh no, that was I'm like, the Russians? I didn't see some Russian woman in there beating the hell out of you. So I suspect from the looks of things, he is the, let's just say, testosterone deficient person in that couple.
I tell you, the memes on this are hilarious. There's one out, it's become, there is a new competition that's like considered a sport where two guys face off on each other and then they slap each other.
Yeah.
So they've got Macron on one side and Brigitte on the other.
I saw another one. It's like an AI video, and it was like the steps going up to the plane, and she's fighting him, beating him, and he's rolling, and she's like beating him all the way up the steps. It was hilarious. Oh, you gotta love that stuff. It's hilarious.
The French are calling it les slap.
Yes. But okay, let's get to the important stuff. But I mean, I don't know what to say when you see that stuff. What a stinking clown show. All right, let's take a look at here. This sonar21.com. That's Larry's website. A lot of good stuff in there, a lot of great articles, and a lot of people out there will say to Garland or whoever, hey, how do you guys keep up with all that stuff? And I'm like, well, I couldn't do it by myself. People like Larry, I go to Larry's website, I go, Andre Martianov, wherever, scottritter.com, you name it. All of the people that you see, generally, they have websites, blogs, things of that nature, Substacks, and I go there and I read that stuff and I learn a lot. So one of the old jokes about mushrooms they treat me like a mushroom, keep me in the dark, and feed me bullshit. But there have been some incidents happen recently that have led people to at least discuss the possibility that Donald Trump is, shall we say, underinformed about very important issues that could lead to World War III, as an example. And are you being treated like a mushroom? Make sure you go to Sonar 21 and check out this story. It's a good one. Larry.
Yeah, I did an interview a couple of weeks back with Doug McGregor, and more to focus on, hey, Doug, describe what your time was like when you were in the first Trump administration. And he was there at the very end. But what he described was, he said, hey, Donald Trump signed an order to withdraw troops from Afghanistan. Now, Trump's order was to have the troops consolidated around Bagram, not to be trapped in Kabul, and to have an orderly withdrawal. And he issued that order. And McGregor went to DOD to follow up on it. And basically, the people that were supposed to be working for Trump, including Kash Patel, didn't follow the order. So now we're faced with this situation where Trump the other day was saying, oh, I'm really upset. I'm upset. I'm really mad at Putin because he's crazy. He just launched missiles and drones killing all these civilians for no reason. And I'm sitting there, I'm watching this going, are you not paying attention? So the drone missile barrage that Trump was describing was launched by Putin starting on May 24th, and it continued into May 25th, Saturday and Sunday. What happened, though, in the previous 7 days, Ukraine had launched 1,400 drones into Russia. And in that period, they had tried to kill Putin with a drone attack as he was flying on a helicopter to Kursk. So surprise, surprise, Putin orders a retaliation with 548 drone attacks and 83 ballistic missiles. And yet here's Trump saying, oh, he's just, that it was Russia on its own with no provocation whatsoever. And then he said, and they killed all these civilians. Now, again, 548 drone strikes by Russians with, well over 90% hit their targets, 83 ballistic missile strikes. And according to Ukrainian sources, only 30 civilians were killed. Now, that means either the Russians aren't targeting civilians, or if they are targeting civilians, they're really terrible shots, terrible marksmen. Well, they weren't targeting civilians. Then at the end of Trump's rant about Putin, one reporter says, well, didn't you hear that the Ukrainians tried to kill him, tried to assassinate him with drones? And Trump, no, I hadn't heard that. Well, that suggests he's getting the mushroom treatment, and he's just being fed what they want to feed him. He's being kept in the dark, and he's not curious enough to say, hey, wait a second, or ask the right questions. Why did Russia do this? Are you telling me that Russia did this for no good reason? Oh, well, no, sir. They didn't get to that point. So that's what's alarming.
Yeah, it seems kind of that weird because here I'm just some, schlump on a YouTube show, and I read, your website and various different things and look around at Moon of Alabama, wherever, right? And you look around, you can pick this stuff up.
Yeah.
And you can see, oh, okay, this happened, that happened. This is how many was fired. Oh, crap. Did they try to kill Putin? And I'm still like, well, he was in an area and there was a lot of drones in the area. An argument could be made that they fired at him. An argument could be made that they happened. I don't know. But I do know. Here's one thing I know for sure. He was flying in his helicopter and there's a whole lot of drones in the area. There are people that can interpret that to mean that they tried to kill him, right? But Trump didn't know that. He should be like, okay, guys, I want to know, was it an assassination, an attempt, or not? Was it an accident? Who was? If I was president and I saw that, I'd say, I need to know, was that what was going on there? I need all the details and the info. What happened? Who fired them? What I'd want to know, because if they killed Putin, this could be nuclear war. This could go real, real bad, and we don't need that. This could go bad. I want to know who was behind that. So not only if you or me are president, would we have picked it up, but we would have said, we need to know what was behind that. This is going to affect what we're trying to do. He didn't even seem to know.
Well, hey, Garland, he hasn't even found out about the assassination attempts on himself.
You're right.
I mean, from day one, I would have said to Bongino or to Kash Patel, I want to know what the hell happened here. Let's, give me all the details. Hasn't done that yet. So,
I think a lot of people are very disappointed and upset. I mean, I don't hate to get sidetracked, but I think it's worth saying. Did you see the video of Bongino and Patel? That hostage video? Yes, Epstein did kill himself. Dude, just don't say anything. If you're so captured at this point and they're like, Mr. Patel, if you tell that, the truth will have to kill you. Okay, fair enough. They might have said that to you. And then just don't bring it up. If somebody says something about Epstein, sorry, what was that? The guy on Welcome Back, Kotter? I'm not sure. Don't know anything about it. I'd respect that more than having a blank look saying, sure, Epstein killed himself. Why do you want to insult me like that? And insult yourself.
So Bongino was on, I saw a brief clip of him on Fox today. Saying that the reason he's saying that is he's watched the videotape that it was on the cell of Epstein, and they had no evidence of anybody going in. Now, the question I would ask to that is, Are you telling me that the camera was on full time? Because my understanding was it was not.
Yes. 2 hours or something, wasn't it?
My understanding is that for about 2 hours, the camera was not on. Well, then you got to say, we can't say. We don't know. If the camera was not, if we didn't have camera on that cell for an hour before and an hour after he wound up dead, then you know what? You got to say, we don't know. We don't have any definitive proof one way or the other than, what the medical examiner says.
And if you remember, the first medical examiner said it wasn't consistent with suicide. Remember that? Yeah. The first one in New York said, well, this bone was broken and that bone was broken, and it takes a lot of force to break those bones. And
right.
I'm supposed to believe that he hung himself on a doorknob, that he put the little thing over a doorknob, like I got a doorknob right here to walk in this room, that boom, and I put something around, and then I fell forward.
That you might be able to strangle yourself that way, but you're not going to break bones. That's one of the reasons they'd hang people before and drop them was to break the neck.
Right.
To snap the neck, get enough force. But that's some significant force. So, they're supposed to release all the stuff on the Epstein, and they haven't released that. So, there's, the odds that the government's lying to you are always very, very high.
Yeah.
And they're covering up a lot of chicanery and skullduggery.
And I still haven't seen the stuff even about Russiagate. They should. Where the hell is Seth Rich's laptop? You know what I mean? I mean, come on. Let's be honest about this. Bring somebody out. If you put me or you in charge of it, and we're going to go grab some guys and say, we want to know who held Hunter Biden's laptop for a year, and then went and told the Twitter and everybody else that it was a Russian operation.
Yeah,
because
Russian
that guy's
information.
Because I'm charging that guy with a crime. I'm charging that guy. Seth Rich. I'm the president. I want to see that laptop. Go to FBI, get the laptop, bring it to me right now. I'm the president. Bring it to me right now. I want to see that laptop. I'm going to put a team on it right now. And you got Doge and all those so-called computer experts. I want people on it right now. On death, I want to know everything that's in that. I'm the president. I can say I want to know everything that's in that. Print it out. I want to see it. I want to talk with whoever examined the laptop, and I want to ask them. I can say that.
Yeah.
But
I've actually been involved with both of those cases. I've been helping Ty Clevenger, the lawyer, who's representing a couple of clients in the matter of Seth Rich. And early on, he'd made an inquiry to NSA. And finally got an answer back from NSA saying that, in fact, they did have, 10 documents classified at the top secret level pertaining to Seth Rich. Well, I checked with a buddy of mine who, at the time, he held a position without describing the specific position within the intelligence community. He had access to a lot of what let's call the special access programs, highly, highly classified. And he said, I showed him the letter that Ty got from the NSA, and he goes, "They're lying." He says they got a lot more documents than that, because the intelligence community was absolutely involved in this operation, and we've got evidence of that, firsthand evidence, that the FBI field office was involved with the investigation, and they were communicating and coordinating their investigation with Peter Strzok, who is in the counterintelligence section of the FBI. Now, why the hell is FBI's counterintelligence section involved in what's supposed to be a domestic murder robbery case in DC? Something's going on there. With respect to the Hunter Biden laptop, I was friends with J.P. McIsaac, the laptop repairman.
Yeah.
his father, Steve, I've been friends with Steve for 25 years. And I didn't really know JP until the day the story broke about the laptop, and that McIsaac was the laptop repairman, and he was getting besieged with reporters. And his dad called me up and said, "Hey, my son's not listening to me. I'm afraid he's going to get killed." And so I got on the phone. It was late on a Thursday night, about 11:30 p.m. And I talked to JP until about 1:30 in the morning, and explained to him what he needed to do and the steps he needed to take to protect himself. And then next day I sent a friend down to get a copy, to do an exact clone of the hard drive, so we could protect it, make sure there was an extra copy. So throughout this, the FBI denied having any knowledge about, we know nothing at all about the laptop, and then Seth Rich laptop. So it's been one cover up after another. The FBI, or at least under the Biden administration, conducted itself as a criminal organization. No other way to look at it.
Yeah, I think it's been an intelligence agency. I feel like it's been, if you look at what it did under Hoover, it never stopped doing. I think it's been like a totalitarian government will have their internal secret police that makes people disappear and does all kinds of devious things. And I feel like that's the FBI, that's part of their job. All kinds of devious things inside the government. We go into the Imran A1 stuff. That's a lot of fishy stuff going on and on and on. And they've opened an office in Ukraine. Comey opened an office in Ukraine as soon as we overthrew the government. Clearly it's an intelligence operation, because what do they need an office in Ukraine for? Right. And the office that Comey opened in Ukraine put together something called the infamous Black Ledger, which was a document that came from Ukraine that said that Paul Manafort was up to no good with the Russians, and he had to be fired by Trump. And then as soon as Trump won, they come forward and say, "Oh yeah, that Black Ledger was bad. It was a false document. It was our mistake." So they were involved in anti-Trump. They were involved in Russiagate stuff. From the FBI was in it up to their ears from the day one. It is nothing but it's the internal version of the CIA.
Oh yeah, it was. So let's take the example of the so-called Russian hack of the DNC. So the cyber investigator brought in on that. It was called CrowdStrike. Well, CrowdStrike was set up by a Ukrainian by the name of Alperovich.
Yeah, Dmitry Alperovich.
And Dmitry told two different stories to the press in the immediate in July after the so-called Russian hack. At first said that it was discovered late April. Then he discovered early May. But in any event, CrowdStrike was brought in to the DNC to investigate this. And from at least the 1st of May until June 10th, CrowdStrike took no action to stop they claimed that they knew early on that the Russians had hacked it and were in the system. But instead of disconnecting the system, they kept it up and running. So the last day that the emails were removed was I believe it was 26th of May or 25th of May, whatever that Sunday was. And we know that from the timestamps on the documents. It took 2 more weeks before CrowdStrike shut it down on June 10th. Now, what really happened in that time frame, because the FBI, former FBI cyber guy, was the number 2 guy at CrowdStrike. And he finally admitted under oath they never had any evidence that there was actually a Russia hack. Because what really happened on that was Seth Rich copied the documents. Seth Rich put them out on a thumb drive, and they were conveyed ultimately to WikiLeaks. And then the CIA, NSA picked up on this because they were monitoring all the information and traffic going into WikiLeaks. And they realized, oh my God, we got a problem. You got all these DNC emails that have gone to WikiLeaks. What do we do? So CIA concocted they came up with this Guccifer 2.0. They were using special cyber tools in the CIA to create documents and stuff, to create this legend that it was the Russians. And they even went as far as, you get metadata that's in the headings of messages. In one of those metadata, they put in there the name of Felix Dzerzhinsky, which is, he was the head of the predecessor of the KGB in the Soviet Union. So, I mean, they were doing everything but painting pictures of Stalin on it.
Right.
But point is, FBI was fully involved in this with the CIA and with intelligence in general. And it was all a complete setup. So, and then they went on, even after Trump was elected, to continue to try to destroy Trump.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, that was the whole game plan. MI6, Haspel was it, but people forget that when the whole stuff went down in London at the beginning, that Gina Haspel was running the London office, and then they came in later and they convinced Trump to put her in power. So it was just, it is what it is. But clearly, it gets back to this article: is Donald Trump getting the mushroom treatment on Russia? I would go one further. That we have a intelligence deep state that not just Trump, that they believe their job is to mislead the president, to lie to the president, to obfuscate, to misconstrue, to do everything they can because they have the way they want things to happen. And whoever the president is, in this instance is Donald Trump, their job is that, I think, they have in fact, let's have it go further. They have a whole apparatus set up specifically to lie, mistreat, and mislead and misguide the president to get him to do what they want, which in this instance is bone-jarring sanctions or whatever the hell you want to call them.
Yeah. I look back. So I joined the CIA. I was 30 years old, 1985. And then was, working as an analyst by September of 1986. First year, joined in September of 85, year of the career trainee program, and then moved into the job as an analyst. And I naively believed back then that my job was to make sure that the president had the truth. In my case, I was working Honduras, which was actually one of the hottest accounts in the Directorate of Intelligence. And you measure how intense or how high profile an account is by how frequently you're writing for the presidential daily brief. Because, the average analyst that comes into the CIA and that's working, Costa Rica or Cyprus or, something that's not terribly hot, they may be lucky to get something in the PDB once every 3 weeks, once a month, once every 2 months. I was writing two times a week, at least, and sometimes 3 times. So the goal, I saw my duty as I've got to make sure I'm telling the president the truth. And it took me a while to grow out of that naivety to realize, hey, there's some lying going on here.
Well, the fact, to me, here's a good giveaway. The fact that the more you look into the Biden administration, the more you realize he wasn't in charge. He didn't even know what the hell was going on. It certainly appears to some extent that's a giveaway.
Yeah.
That the machine doesn't give a crap about the president. And if the president does have any idea what's going to go on, then they want to make sure that everything he knows is wrong.
Joe Biden is the closest we've come to Peter Sellers in the movie Being There.
Yeah.
Gardner. Except Gardner was even though he played a retarded man, he turned out to be a far more intelligent president than Biden did. But again, the corporate, the line that went on. Now we got Jake Tapper coming out. I don't know nothing about don't lie. I can't believe they lied to us all this time. And meanwhile, he was attacking people that came out at the time trying to say, Biden's not right in the head. He's saying and acting in ways that are indicative of somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's. Anybody that's had a parent that's, over the age of 80 and that is starting to slip mentally, when you see it, there's no doubt about it. You just pray to God you never are in that position.
Yeah, and yeah, and I think Joe Biden might have been getting some kind of a treatment for his cancer. Most likely, he's some very advanced stage of cancer he had. He was getting treatment for that. That could have contributed, to his issues, especially with his age. He had brain surgery. He had multiple brain surgeries.
Yeah.
And apparently he had cancer, so he's obviously getting treatment for that. I mean, the guy was not exactly the picture of health by any stretch of the imagination. Multiple brain surgeries, some level of dementia, advanced stages of cancer. And all the media Jake Tapper would tell us was, if you said, hey, I think this guy might have some problems, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist and possibly even a Russian propagandist.
Yeah, I've come to the point in my life where I don't believe a single thing the government says anymore unless I can find some independent corroboration for it. It's just not to be trusted. And that's been particularly the case with Russia. They are lying about the number of casualties Russia's suffering. They are lying about Russia's reason for starting the special military operation. They are lying about the nature of Putin and the Russian people. The American people are being deliberately gaslighted into believing that the Russians are about the worst possible threat in the world in order that we have animus towards them, without understanding that, Russia really should be our most natural ally in the world, both from and actually Russia has a unique leadership role to play in the world, because unlike the United States, where we are hung up on the race thing, we're hung up on the religious thing, where Muslims and Christians don't necessarily get along. Russia has, they've worked that out. They've never been saddled with enslaving people because of the color of their skin. In fact, they're called Slavs for a reason, because many of them were slaves. The Slavic people were enslaved. So they've lived there and done that. And while they are a predominantly Russian Orthodox Christian faith and Eastern Orthodox Christianity, they live in harmony and respect with their Muslims and the Hindus. And I mean, they've got 140 plus ethnic groups to worry about. And those ethnic groups identify with, the Muslims identify as Muslims, but they also identify first and foremost as Russian. This is our land. This is our country. When the Chechen War started, which was funded and incited by the CIA, when this was recruiting radical Islamists that started to attack in southern Russia and Dagestan and up through into central Russia, the Muslims in Dagestan are the ones who took up arms against those outsiders and pleaded with Putin for support to come in and help fight, which he provided. So, Russia has actually shown a way that a country can be multi-ethnic and yet retain its national identity, and it's really it's a gift. They've also, I think, shown us how a country can be in the complete toilet bowl from an economic standpoint. After the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the life expectancy in Russia went from like 63 down to 56. So that means you had a lot of people dying a lot younger than they should have. And the number of people that could be considered middle class was only at 7%, which means at least 92% of the people were living in a poverty state. And yet, once Putin took over, this country is now, they've got over 50% of the people are in the middle class. They still have income inequality, but not as bad as what we have in the United States. And the people's in terms of personal power, purchasing power parity (PPP), Russia's got now the 4th largest economy in the world. Now, that you talk about a miracle turnaround in 26 years, and yet the American people are constantly inundated with this propaganda that it's an authoritarian regime, that they're communists, that they're, murderers, they're thieves, they're on and on and on. It's just, it's pathetic.
So let me ask you this: you see this kind of silliness come out of Donald Trump, and you talked about it in your article. For those who are new, just I'll put that up again. Over Sonar 21. That's we're talking about a lot of things, but one of the things is Larry's latest article is Donald Trump getting the mushroom treatment on Russia, which brings up an obvious question, and that is this: if you know that the Russians know that, we all who are paying attention know that Donald Trump may not be up on things like he should be. You talked about how you think the Russians will deal with that, because here's the reality. The one thing you learn about the Russians, they're very practical, and they're going to play the hand they're dealt, and they're going to look at it and say, okay, Trump's not, he's saying this, blah, 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 blah. Here's the issue. How do we move forward? How do you think the Russians deal with Trump under these circumstances?
Well, so how I deal with what Trump said would be, wait a second. What do you, I would have called him out, gotten his face, and the Russians played it cool. They stood back and they said, look, it looks like President Trump's not being properly informed. And so he's not being told the reality of what's going on. So we look forward to being able to communicate that to him. And we so appreciate his efforts on peace. So, they knew how to smooth butter on his butt and to, if you will, cater to his ego a little bit. But I think it was a sincere, serious gesture. Now, I suspect if Trump and Putin talk again, the conversation will go something like Trump will start, well, why did you do this? There's just no reason for that. And Vladimir Putin, so Mr. Donald, listen, let me explain to you what happened before this. That in the 7 days preceding, Ukraine launched 1,400 drones at my country. They hit and they destroyed a church. They were attacking apartment buildings. But then to top it off, they tried to assassinate me. Now I know you, Mr. President, you, Donald, know what it's like to be the target of an assassination attempt. And Trump would say, oh, yeah, got that right. I do understand that. And Putin said, therefore, we had no choice but to retaliate, to eliminate that threat of these drones. But we made sure that we didn't target civilians, and I can show you the proof of that, because we launched 585 drones. We launched 83 ballistic missiles, and fewer than 30 Ukrainian civilians were killed. We didn't intend to kill them. They were just collateral damage. I would note that you've killed more civilians with your operations in Yemen, and you've not seen us come out and condemn you on that. And so, after that kind of conversation, Trump's going to be, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I see your point. So Russia's not trying to pick a fight with Trump. They prefer to settle things peacefully. But I think they also are realistic enough to recognize that once Trump is gone, there's no guarantee that you're going to continue to have any kind of cordial relationship with the United States.
What do you think about these relationships? There's I guess continuing negotiations. There's been reports that the Ukrainians have threatened the Russian negotiators, threatened their families. The U.S. apparently U.S. is complained, or we don't like this guy on the team. He's too and I'm thinking, you don't get to pick their team. Yeah. That's like a football game starting and somebody calls the other coach. You're gonna start Tom Brady. We don't like him starting. Yeah. Who do you got as a back? No. That ain't the way the game works, but it's just weird. There's weird things going on in the negotiations. But anyway, what do you think about the Ukrainians allegedly threatening Russian members of the team, and the Americans apparently saying to the Russians, we think we should be able to pick our team and your team for negotiating.
Yeah, the Russians are just ignoring it. They're taking the initiative to say, hey, we'll be seeing you in Istanbul on June 2nd. We have our memorandum ready to present to you, which we'll present to Ukraine. See you there. And they let the United States know. Now, the reason they let the United States know was in order for the United States to put pressure on Ukraine to get there. But they're continuing that sort of let's call it that, the diplomatic track, while they are pushing ahead on the military front dramatically. And the pace of advancement is accelerating with each passing day.
Is it smart for the Russians to continue keeping the diplomatic track open?
Yeah. Because if nothing else, they're trying to show China and India, their partners in BRICS, hey, look, we're trying to get a peaceful solution to this, but these people just refuse to cooperate.
Well, yeah, and if and when, and I think it's not an if, but a when things start to get hairy for Ukraine, let's say their lines start to crumble and things start to going bad for them, there will be that door open. You know what I mean? They'll be in the midst of it. And they're like, well, you can't talk now. Now their lines start crumbling, things start going bad. They may start getting and the U.S. and their backers may say, we need a way out of this. And they've provided them a door to get out. So I think it's smart. Let me ask you this. What do you think about Merz? This guy's threatening the Russians, and the Russians are saying, hey, if you do that, man, we're going to just have to blow up the plant that makes those missiles. But Germany, when we look at it, they really got no military to speak of. Really, I think they got like 30 operational planes or something. They have no military. They couldn't get in a war with Wisconsin right now. They'd have difficulty winning a war with Wisconsin.
Well, first when I heard of his Fred Merz, I was thinking, God, William Frawley, he's been dead for years from I Love Lucy, Lucy. But this Frederick Merz, he's driven by one thing, money. He made his money with BlackRock, and he is now BlackRock's boy. He's got one mission in life. His job is not to serve the interests of Germany. The gun to his head is he's got to serve the interests of BlackRock. And to that end, but why? Well, BlackRock is so financially committed in Ukraine and has purchased a lot of land that now Russia controls. And if Russia controls it, that means BlackRock doesn't control it, which means they're going to take a beating on their investment. So, that's what's motivating Merz. Now, the whole Taurus issue, what makes that so potentially explosive, no pun intended, is that unlike the Storm Shadow and the ATACMS, a nuclear warhead can be fitted on a Taurus missile. So if you are a Russian air defense crew, you can't assume that it's just a conventional weapon coming at you. You've got to assume that it's a nuclear weapon. So that's why Russia is just across the board vowing that if Merz actually does this, that Russia will not only fire against the spot in Ukraine from which it was launched, but they will go after the site in Germany, Rheinmetall, the manufacturer that produced it, and they'll hit it with an Oreshnik missile, which is it's like a nuclear device. Taking them out. Now, since they came back with that threat, Merz, it just sounds like changed his tune a little bit. Mm-hmm. But this is Merz is again. He's responding to the financial incentive, and there's probably some pressure on him too. He probably still has some investments with BlackRock that they're threatening to water down or weaken or take away. Who knows?
I think you're right. Have you heard anything more about Iran? Now, my position has been for a while. My position was, I don't believe the U.S. is going to attack Iran because I believe that Iran has too much conventional power. That could the U.S. do some damage to Iran? Sure. Iran could do some bad damage that wouldn't be worth it. And then what? You hit them and they knock the hell out of your bases and other things. And then what do? You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, you punch them and they knock your damn tooth out. And then what do? Do you just walk away? What happened? We lost, I don't know how many people in bases. Do you continue and make it worse? Do they close this? The liabilities were too much. And one thing I'll say about Trump don't like to pull the trigger on stuff. He's not, he'll talk a lot, but he's not one to pull the trigger. And I just thought, if you look at the potential problems, I did not believe Trump will pull the trigger on that, which he may, but I still don't think so. But what have you heard, the last thing you've heard about the potential for either a conflict or some kind of a deal with Iran?
Well, actually, what I've heard is within the military, orders have been issued that would provide it gives the military the authority to take action against Iran. Now, that's counterbalanced by Trump's recent public remarks that he has rebuffed Bibi Netanyahu and pressure to launch an attack. He said that would be counterproductive at this time. And speaking hopefully that there is an agreement near a deal to be struck with Iran. I hope that that's the case. The deal's pretty straightforward and easy, but it would allow Iran to retain its ability to do peaceful enrichment of nuclear energy of uranium at 3.6%, but in exchange for ironclad guarantees that it's not building a nuke, which means inspection of all nuclear facilities in Iran. The deal's there waiting to be had. It's been Trump who's been refusing to pull the trigger on it. He's been trying to get more, or trying to get the Iranians to agree to give up, or to take a 1-year pause or something. Iran's not going to do that. And anybody, when Netanyahu suggested the Libya option, Gaddafi gave everything to the West. And as someone said, he wound up with a sword up his backside and died. So, Iran's watched that happen. So that's, we're not doing that.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Right now, Trump needs a win. He should get it, Iran, because, the courts have struck down his tariffs, and now his so-called big beautiful deal, which what's interesting is Doge came in and they're firing a bunch of people. People said, "What do you think?" And I said, notwithstanding whether they are good, bad, or indifferent, the employees, I said, here's the bottom line: however much they save, they'll give more than that to the Pentagon in increase. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Now I'm understanding that in actual savings, it's around $9 billion for firing people and closing buildings. And they're increasing the Pentagon budget by $150 billion. So if you ask me, would I rather have the money go to some soccer mom who lives in, Hyattsville, or go to Lockheed Martin? I'd always rather it go to a family of 4 buying a townhome. Right. Yeah. But whatever the case, Doge, that's Musk. Things went bad for him. Out the door. He's gone on about his way. Donald Trump said, "Hey, I'm going to save all of this money." And now his budget, his big, beautiful budget, adds to the deficit. It does the opposite of what he said. And he knew. He was like, I'm like, well, Trump's saying that we're in economic trouble, and he recognized it. At least they won't recognize. He recognized it, and they add more to the debt. So his deficit's going up. Well, I'm going to get a deal with the Ukraine. That ain't working out so well. Well, I'll give you information on Epstein, JFK, Martin Luther King. Nothing. So Trump needs a win. Everything that he said he was going to do, all of this stuff is flopping. He should sign the Iran deal. At least he can say, look what I got. I understand they're close to maybe a ceasefire or a stop in Gaza, which is an ungodly, he's back to that ungodly genocide. So Trump needs to, first of all, just sign a deal with Iran. You need a win, dude. Anywhere you can get it, you got to get a win.
No, you're exactly right. In fact, on his big, beautiful bill, I I know that Senator Ron Johnson, no relation, he was on Tucker, interviewed by Tucker yesterday, and a great interview. And he lays out why he's not supporting the bill. Rick Scott, one of my senators here in Florida, he's not supporting it. Rand Paul's not going to support it. So they're not going to have enough votes to pass the bill, and it's going to require Trump to, scale back. And so we'll see. But you're right about him. He's really painted into a corner because the judge that knocked down the tariff authority, that's going to be tied up in courts for several months. And so the Trump's plans, hopes for resetting the international economy with those tariffs, that's now dead in the water. And so this is, you're right. He's going to have to try to get a deal done, and the low hanging fruit in this is Iran.
Yeah, they're saying, yeah, we want a deal. You know what? Let me sign this and say, look what I did. Hold up that piece of paper. And even then, I just don't feel as though, even if it goes to the Supreme Court, I don't think he's got a good chance. I never did feel that he's got a good chance once this went to court with the tariffs, but because he's trying to say it's an emergency. And I don't think his argument that it's an emergency, legally speaking, is well-founded. And it doesn't shock me that the court threw it out, because you always have problems when the court starts looking at, saying, well, this is something that's delegated to Congress, and there's got to be special circumstances if you don't do that, and they won't cross that. So I never really felt like he had a good chance of that. But the thing about it is, he was going to use all of that extra money. That was the plan, to pass his big, beautiful bill. That way we can, still keep the Trump tax cuts from 2017 and do this and that, and it won't drive the deficit through the roof because he'll have more money coming in. I think that was the plan. Bring in more money from the deficits. That'll allow. Well, now that he can't add in what he believes would come in. I mean, the deficits from the tariffs. He can't add in what he believes would come from the tariffs. When you look at the deficit now from that bill, it's going to be friggin' through the roof, and it's not even going to make sense. So that kind of kills his whole plan.
Well, and then if Congress, the Senate, Lindsey Graham's threatened with bone-crushing sanctions on Russia, and he's got 81 votes, he claims. Well, even if Trump vetoes that bill, it goes through. And unfortunately, it's not so much sanctions on Russia, it's sanctions on India and China for dealing with Russia, which is just, if they really go through with those kinds of 500% tariffs, it's going to create chaos for Trump's ability to conduct foreign relations. So, yeah, it's a mess.
Yeah. Last thing I want to ask you about, one last thing. We got like 6 minutes. Have you been following where the EU now is sanctioning? There's a guy named Roper. There's a woman named Alina Lip. She is and basically it's EU sanctions.
Yes.
EU, not German. There's nowhere. These are German citizens. There's nowhere they can go to court and say, hey, I didn't do anything wrong. And with and there's another one called Red something or other, but whatever. They do a lot of stuff on Gaza, right? And so now in the Russia sanctions, they're sanctioning so-called Russians. They're sanctioning German citizens, saying, we're locking your bank accounts up. You can't get any of your money out of your bank accounts. You can't travel anywhere in the EU. And these aren't Russians. They're Germans. And the one guy that they're sanctioning, everything there says, if you read it, it says, well, they have been reporting on Gaza, and they were supporting protesters at some college, genocide protesters, which means they love Hamas, whatever the hell, that crazy crap. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, that is like totalitarian fascist crap.
Yeah, George Orwell's nightmare has become alive and real. And now it's interesting that they announced yesterday, Rubio, that they're going to deny visas to European officials that are involved with censoring social media. So, and that's sort of got some attention over in Europe. They go, whoa, wait a second. But as far as protected speech, that's a thing of the past. across Europe, it's become an authoritarian state, more so than anything you'll see in Russia. Far more freedom of expression in Russia compared to the EU.
Well, I've started figuring things out. I remember during COVID when you had to have, the what, and you had to have something on your phone that said you had it and all that stuff in order to travel. And like Russia was like, nah, we're not going to do that stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute, I thought they were supposed to be the great totalitarian people, and they're like not doing any of that stuff. But here we sit. And you know what? I always have to bring this. I remember when J.D. Vance, had his great sermon where he talked about the UK, and I said he's right. I agree with him. There's nothing he said that's wrong. But at the same time, we're like throwing people out of the country because they are in opposition to Gaza, of what's going on there. We are throwing students out. We're arresting people. We're doing all kinds of things. We got here. Maybe you can say stuff on social media or whatever, unless it's about Israel or Zionism or Gaza. So I thought, while in fact, the Trump administration has some validity. There's perfectly validity in their claims about what's going on in Europe. But when you don't allow people in America to exercise their First Amendment rights to complain about the foreign policy of another country that isn't even this country, I don't care what country it is.
Right.
I should be able to say I don't like the American government, the Russian government, the Chinese government, the Israeli government, but one of those governments I can't. And so it kind of puts a damper on the Trump administration's people's arguing about, not that it's not correct, about them, when we literally have like Zionist organizations that will hand names to the Trump administration and say, go get them. And the Trump administration will grab that person and throw them out of the country.
Yeah. Well, let's sort of turn the tables and ask, would we be receptive and allow a member of Congress to dress in a Russian military uniform or a Chinese military uniform and walk into the House of Representatives? Would we allow the Russians or the Chinese through the American-Russian Public Affairs Committee or the Chinese-American Public Affairs Committee to raise millions of dollars with some of it coming from either Russia or China directly, and distribute that to members of Congress, and then to have an annual convention where the members of Congress were asked to flock there to, speak and to be fed and watered and entertained by either Russia or China. Well, you know the answer to that. We'd say, yeah, there are two ways: no way and no way in hell.
Right.
Allow it. And yet we allow that with Israel. So it's just, let's highlight the hypocrisy here that, you know what? If you wouldn't do it with Russia and China, you shouldn't do it with Israel. Period.
Yeah, you're right, Larry. Well, thank you very much. Once again, everybody, let me show you Larry's great website before we go, and recommend highly that you go there on a regular basis. This is Sonar21, sonar21.com. And you can see great websites. And he has another story. Here's one: EU sanctions German journalists. There you go. That's it. Peter Hensler. The Ukraine war validates the Second Amendment. Germany made we talked about a couple of these last week, but you can see that Larry has a lot of good articles on there. He keeps it up to date. And of course, here's what's important. They got to support us. So all of this stuff is very expensive. This comes right out of Larry's own pocket. So you can use PayPal, PayShoot, Patreon, or buy me a coffee if you can afford it. If there's any way you can do it, please donate to Larry's site. Help keep that important work going so that people like me and you can read that, and we can keep up with what's going. As I said earlier, you see me doing these podcasts, and you're like, wow, Garland really knows his stuff. Well, it's not that I really know my stuff. It's kind of like I can't think of his name. There was the coach for the legendary Yankees when they won all of the games.
Billy Martin?
No, way back before that in the 50s with Murderers Row. The famous I can't think of his name, but they asked him, they said, wow, they said to him, man, you know, look at that. You win all these championships.
Or Casey Stengel.
Casey Stengel. And they said,
that was the Mets.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Casey Stengel. And they said, yeah, you won you're winning. And they said, you're a genius. And he said, you know the definition of a genius? And they said, what? He said, taking credit for all the home runs that somebody else hit. So that's what we do a lot of times here. The Garland's a genius. Yeah, because I read Sonar 21 and, you know, all these other, I read a Moon of Alabama, whatever. And then I look like a genius because I'm learning from all these other guys. So look, here's the bottom line. I say that to say this, sonar21.com. Check it out regularly. If you, any way you can afford to donate. Larry, thanks a lot. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule.
Brother Nixon, I appreciate your generosity and your ability as a host. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right, everybody. Hey, I'll be back on at 9 p.m. this evening with the one and only Andrei Martyanov. And we're going to be talking again about military hardware, about the old fashioned stuff. You know, there's all these new drones, but machine guns, tanks, RPGs, artillery. What are those things still important in modern warfare? I'm suspecting that Andrei Martyanov is going to answer that yes, but we're going to find out. So come back and hang out with us again tonight. Thanks. We're out.